The recipe for greatness. How a mother's love fed a legend. Every morning before the biggest matches of his career, Zinedine Zidane would call his mother and ask for the same thing. "Mama, tell me the recipe again." Not for tactical advice, not for encouragement, but for a simple Algerian dish that had somehow become the source of his greatness. This is the story of how a mother's love, served one spoonful at a time, created football's most elegant genius. What began as childhood comfort food evolved into something far more profound. A ritual that connected Zidane to his roots, his family, and a strength that transcended physical ability. The secret ingredient wasn't found in any spice market. It was love, measured in generations, and served with hands that had known both poverty and pride. Malika's couscous du courage, as the family privately called it, wasn't listed in any cookbook. The recipe had been passed down through 5 generations of Zidane women, each adding their own secret touches, while preserving the essential spirit that made it magical. But this wasn't couscous prepared for celebration or tradition. This was couscous prepared for transformation. A specific recipe Malika cooked only when her children faced their greatest challenges, needed their deepest strength, or stood on the precipice of their most important moments. The preparation began not with ingredients, but with intention. Malika would clear her mind, say a prayer for her son's success, and begin a process that took exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, a timing so precise it seemed ritualistic rather than culinary. The tradition began in 1984, when 12-year-old Zinedine faced his first real trial by football fire, selection for AS Foresta's youth team. He had been practicing for weeks, but the night before tryouts, he was paralyzed by self-doubt. "I can't do it, Mama," he had told Malika, tears streaming down his young face. "The other boys are stronger, faster. I'm not good enough." Instead of words of encouragement, Malika went to her kitchen and began preparing something Zinedine had never seen before. For 4 hours, she worked with ingredients that seemed ordinary: semolina, vegetables, lamb, spices, but combined them with a care and precision that transformed the simple into the sacred. When she finally served the dish, it carried aromas that seemed to tell stories, flavors that tasted like memory and hope combined. As Zinedine ate, something shifted inside him. Not just hunger being satisfied, but confidence being nourished at its deepest level. What made Malika's couscous extraordinary wasn't visible to the eye. Beyond the traditional semolina, lamb and vegetables, she added ingredients that couldn't be measured. Memory. Each grain of couscous was rolled while she recited stories of Zinedine's ancestors, mountain farmers who had overcome impossible hardships, warriors who had found courage in the darkest moments, dreamers who had achieved the impossible. Intention. Every spice was added with a specific wish for her son's future. Cinnamon, for sweetness in victory. Black pepper, for strength in adversity. Saffron, for the golden moments that would define his legacy. Time. The 4-hour, 17-minute preparation wasn't arbitrary. It was the exact time Malika had been in labor with Zinedine, making each serving a recreation of his birth, a reminder that he had been born to overcome challenges. Prayer. Throughout the preparation, she whispered the same prayer in Arabic that her grandmother had taught her. "May this nourishment become strength. May this meal become victory. May this love become greatness." The morning after eating his mother's special couscous, 12-year-old Zinedine walked onto the tryout field, transformed. Where there had been doubt, he found certainty. Where there had been fear, he discovered fearlessness. His touches were more precise, his vision clearer, his movement more fluid. He didn't just make the team. He dominated the tryout in ways that surprised even him. Coaches who had planned to evaluate his basic skills instead found themselves watching something approaching artistry. It was like watching a different child, recalled Jean Varro, the coach who selected him. The boy who had seemed nervous the week before played with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was meant to be. That night, Zinedine asked his mother what she had put in the couscous. Her answer would become the foundation of their pre-match ritual. Nothing you can buy, everything you need. As Zidane's career progressed, so did the ritual. The physical meal evolved into something more sophisticated. A phone conversation, where Malika would recite the recipe step by step, allowing Zinedine to visualize the preparation process and absorb its psychological benefits, even from thousands of miles away. Before his professional debut with Cannes in 1989, the call lasted 47 minutes, the entire preparation process described in loving detail. Before the 1998 World Cup final, it was a 2-hour conversation that covered not just ingredients and techniques, but family history, ancestral strength, and the weight of representing his heritage on football's biggest stage. May 20th, 1989. Professional debut. Mama, tell me about the saffron again. Why do we add it last? The call came at 6 a.m., 3 hours before kickoff. Malika spent 20 minutes explaining how saffron must be added when the couscous is ready to receive its golden color, just as Zinedine was ready to receive his golden opportunity. July 12, 1998, World Cup final. Mama, I need the full recipe. From the beginning, Malika recited not just the ingredients, but the stories behind each one. How her grandmother had used the same spices when her husband returned from war. How her mother had prepared the dish before important family decisions. May 15th, 22, Champions League final. Tell me about the lamb, Mama. Why does it have to cook so slowly? Malika explained that patience in cooking creates tenderness in meat, just as patience in life creates strength in character. Zidane scored one of the greatest goals in final history that night. Sports psychologists who later studied Zidane's pre-match rituals identified several powerful psychological mechanisms at work in his mother's recipe ritual. Anchoring. The familiar conversation created a mental anchor that transported him from the chaos of elite football to the security of maternal love, providing instant psychological stability. Visualization. Hearing the recipe step by step engaged his imagination in a process of creation and transformation, priming his mind for the creative thinking required on the pitch. Cultural connection. The ritual connected him to his Algerian heritage at moments when he represented France, resolving potential identity conflicts and providing complete psychological integration. Sensory memory. Recalling the taste, smells, and textures of the dish activated powerful sensory memories associated with comfort. Security and past successes. What made the ritual sustainable was the family's gradual understanding that this wasn't superstition, it was communication. The recipe recitation became a coded language for expressing love, confidence, and faith that transcended simple words. When Malika said, "Add the cinnamon slowly, it should dissolve like sweetness entering your soul," she was really saying, whatever happens today, remember that you are loved completely. When she described rolling each grain of couscous until it becomes perfect, she was reminding him that excellence comes through patient attention to details that others might overlook. When Zidane joined Real Madrid and faced the pressure of being the world's most expensive player, the ritual became even more crucial. The phone calls before El Clasico matches became legendary within the family, sometimes lasting hours, as Malika guided her son through not just the recipe, but the emotional preparation for football's most intense rivalry. The chickpeas must be cooked until they're soft enough to crush with a gentle touch, she would say. Code for you must be strong enough to handle any pressure, but gentle enough to maintain your elegance. When Zidane became a coach, he adapted his mother's wisdom into his management philosophy. Players noticed that his pre-match talks often included metaphors about patience, gradual development, and the importance of preparation time, all concepts derived from years of listening to his mother's cooking wisdom. Coach Zidane taught us that excellence is like cooking, explained Real Madrid midfielder Luka Modric. You can't rush the important parts. You have to let everything come together naturally, at the right time, with the right intention. Before Zidane's last match as Real Madrid coach in 2018, he made one final recipe call to his mother. At 75, Malika's memory of the exact ingredients had begun to fade, but the essential spirit remained strong. "Zinedine," she said, "I may not remember if it's 2 teaspoons of cumin or 3, but I remember why we cook with love. I remember why we feed the soul before we feed the body. I remember why some recipes are about more than food." That conversation lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. Exactly the time it took to prepare the original dish, and exactly the time it had taken to bring Zinedine into the world. Today, Zidane's own children know their grandmother's special recipe, understanding that they're inheriting more than culinary knowledge. They're receiving a methodology for transforming love into strength, tradition into confidence, and family wisdom into personal power. His son Enzo, now pursuing his own football career, has begun calling his father before important matches with a familiar request. "Papa, tell me about Grandma's couscous." The true power of Malika's recipe was never in its ingredients. She had discovered what sports psychologists and nutritionists spend careers trying to understand, that the most important nourishment happens not in the body, but in the soul. Every time she recited the recipe, she was feeding her son's confidence, seasoning his courage, and slow cooking his greatness with the patient love that only mothers possess. In her small kitchen in La Castellane, surrounded by the same pots she had used for 50 years, Malika Zidane had created something more valuable than any football tactic or training method. She had perfected the recipe for transforming potential into achievement, fear into courage, and ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. The secret ingredient was never a mystery. It was love, measured in generations, prepared with patience, and served with the unshakable faith that some hungers can only be satisfied by a mother's hands and a mother's heart. Every great footballer has coaches who teach them to play. Zinedine Zidane had a mother who taught him to feast on his own greatness, one carefully prepared spoonful at a time. The recipe for greatness, it turned out, had been hiding in plain sight all along, in the kitchen where love became nourishment, where tradition became strength, and where a mother's wisdom became a legend's foundation.